Appreciate your time, man.
For sure, man. What's going down? Hit me with
Well,
what you got.
well, I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, and like the more I was thinking about things, I was like, I'm really excited about the new project that you're a part of. It's Disciples of Verity, right? That's the title.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah,
Um, it's pretty crazy. It's been kind of like a lot of up and downs with that project just because of just being busy and Glover being so busy. Obviously, Living
yeah,
Color is still touring, and they've been actually
yeah,
doing more touring now than they've done in
yeah.
the past, like I don't know, like 5, 10 years. But they're super busy right now. But we actually just got the masters done for the new full length
Nice.
called Nexus. So, and then I'm like, the first record, I actually wasn't supposed to be in the band on the first record. I was supposed to
Oh.
help George finish writing the record and produce it, and then move on. He basically tricked me. So, like I helped him do all this stuff and I programmed a bunch of drums, whatever. And then like I think it was like a month later, or whatever. He's like, "Hey, do you think you could come do these drums for these songs?" I was like, "What songs?" I had forgotten about. I was on to my next thing already. So, and he goes, "The songs that you helped me write, whatever a month ago or whatever it was." I was like, "What are you talking about right now? Like seriously?" And then it turns out like he has already booked studio time for like 2 weeks from when he asked me to do this. So I literally went in there and did the drums for that first album basically on the spot. you know,
Damn.
uh, Never having played them like physically ever before. I just walked in and did the shit. So that was crazy. But this record I feel like was much more a better representation and more cohesive by
Hmm.
far. So I feel like um, this record there was a lot more personal input
Yeah,
because I knew it's all right, this is ours, like legit.
yeah,
Um, so I think I'm really excited for people to hear it. We've been dealing with um tons of just band stuff, ups and downs, and figuring out what you're gonna do, like with getting agents or trying to play shows and play more shows, and then dealing
yeah.
with so much stuff. And like part of that is my fault too, as well, because obviously, God forbid, stuff is going on. I manage and produce another band called Dissensions, which we're just finishing up their record as well, and
Okay,
it's getting mixed by Zeus next month.
okay.
But so I've been just running around like a maniac and doing filling studio work, for just random calls that I've been getting to just go do whatever gospel gigs or commercial gig or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, some beat R&B work that I did.
Oh, okay.
But hey man, uh they might say I'm whoring, but you know what? I gotta make that money. You know what I mean? So whore away is what I shall do.
Horrible. But
If I get the call and I like it, I'm going.
well, like, right,
Paycheck sounds good.
you're a musician, so like you want to play music too, right? And obviously, like right, most people first got introduced to you through, God forbid, I'm not even sure if you had anything before then, but
Um, no, I mean, essentially through my life, I was trained more for classical percussion and jazz stuff, and I did drum corps for a lot of years. Um, so I didn't even really start like I was kind of jamming with friends in high school and stuff, but I was never really like in a band per se.
okay,
There's just like, when you're high school, there's a bunch of dudes that play instruments. So some of
yeah.
them you're friends with, you get together and hang out at somebody's house. Usually it's my house because I play drums, and my mom's also a musician, so she didn't really care as much.
Nice. Okay.
Um, so, there was kind of like jamming and stuff like that, but I never was really like in a band per se, like, oh, we're
Okay.
a band, we're gonna call ourselves this or that or whatever. And honestly, I stopped playing drum set for a long time. I just marched drum corps and just kind of
Mm.
was focused more on that and teaching that style as well.
Oh,
So,
okay.
um, you know, the whole drum set thing and then starting to play metal didn't really come back into my life until like 1996 or 97. So, um, you know, the majority of my early life wasn't, I liked that music, from obviously from 1987, like when Master of Puppets and Among the Living and especially
Yeah.
South of Heaven came out. Um, as a drummer, being 13, one of the first songs I learned was Spill the Blood off South of Heaven. So,
Oh, nice.
y- yeah, I mean, and that was like, as a drummer, Dave Lombardo at that time was just like, it
Oh,
was like, that's what I want to do. That's who I want to be, you know.
okay.
Come full circle. I've hung out with him many, 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 many times. We've had some interesting exchanges, to say the least,
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah.
Some really fun moments. He's a great dude. But so yeah, I mean, a long time after that, from like 13 to like maybe 24 or 25, I didn't really play drum set at all. You know,
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I played something like jazz band and stuff, but like actually like playing every day, playing. I never, I didn't do a ton of it. I did it here and there.
Yeah.
Like I said, just jamming with friends. Like I always had a drum set in the house,
Yeah.
but it was kind of like this is the least of my concerns when I
Okay.
was practicing drums. Like I was more practicing rudiments and marching style,
Okay.
drumming and into classical percussion a little bit more than playing drum set. Like I would play it, but I didn't really dedicate those kind of hours. Like drum chorus practicing 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
So, but
So
it's a different kind of demand.
so then I mean that's a long time without like the I'm in a band. Um then as you and I talked about on Twitter, right? The first song I heard by God forbid was Mind Eraser, and it was on a sampler of some sort. And you said that was the
Yes.
first song that you guys wrote together?
That was literally the first song we wrote as God Forbid. So we
Wow.
were a band together. We just weren't called God Forbid yet. And we
Hmm.
hadn't written anything um of that kind of like heavy nature, like that kind of style. Like that was the first song I could say where it was definitively
Hmm.
this the style change was noticeable. And
Okay.
I remember that day literally. I mean, there's a lot of days that have meshed together, but I can describe that day for you literally like it was yesterday.
Hmm.
Um, at the time, Beaker, our bass player, wasn't in the band. We had a female bass player by the name of Lisa DiCavolo, who went
Hmm.
to my high school, but she was also a bartender at a strip club. And that's where I had met her and started talking to her about metal. She was in an all girl
Nice.
metal band at one point called Stranded in Sweden. Kind of sound like Metallica, but as all girls.
Okay.
Um, so she was in the band with us, and we used to practice at her house, in her garage, which was like it was like a freestanding garage off from the house.
Hmm.
Didn't have any air conditioning. It was the middle of fucking July in humid ass New Jersey, and anyone who's from New
Yeah.
Jersey will tell you, summers here is no motherfucking joke.
Nope.
It,
Not at
it's for
all.
serious. It's for serious out here with the humidity. And we were jamming in, and like Byron comes rolling up. We had already been practicing for like a little while, and we're like, what the fuck? Why is this too late? He rolls up, and he got pulled over by the cops. He was all pissed off, and he came and he just started screaming, "Wah!" Like we're like, and literally, as soon as he started doing it, Dallas started playing that first riff.
Yeah.
Just bang, bang, bang. He's just like, "Ah." And really, like, we hadn't heard anybody else around really kind of doing it like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, there was heavy bands and stuff that existed, but that kind of sort of chaos and just raw brutality, um, there wasn't really bands doing that kind of thing at that point. And we just
Yeah.
knew that, like, all right, this is, this is it. And that's actually when we changed the name to God Forbid from the previous name, which I will not mention.
Okay.
If people want to dig and find it, it's not hard to find out, but it's out there. It's been
Okay.
said many times, but I try to not bring it up as much as humanly possible.
Well, and like I had mentioned to you, like at the time, right? I was in like Metallica because in like 96, right, I was graduating high school. So like I was musically, I was just getting out of like Metallica as my safe zone, maybe checking out some slightly heavier stuff. I like
Mhm.
Slayer, but that was kind of like you had to like Slayer. Um, but I heard that
Yeah.
song and I was like, this is too heavy for me, but it's awesome. And all these years that stuck with me, and I still have it, my MP3 player, all my playlists. Like Mind Eraser is still a monumental piece of my music history. But like we also talked about, you guys were one of the first all non-white bands that was like a major figure in at least the American music scene for at the time contemporary music. And I remember from the fan side, right? And I mentioned this to you, there were a lot of people like, why are there black guys doing extreme music? Obviously ignorant on a lot of levels, but it was kind of a weird thing because a lot of people like to think of metal as, really accepting. But to hear that from the fan side was disturbing to say the least, but it was also like, well, what the fuck's the problem? And I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you did, but I don't know what your experience was like as musicians in that world.
Well, I can tell you that um, my personal experience, and I'm sure that the other dudes can identify with this, and even Beaker, even though he's white, obviously, I think in some ways it may have been worse for him
Hmm.
in certain regards. Like I can't attest to his day-to-day experiences, but I had seen some things.
Hmm.
But I don't know how much I can mention of that because that it takes a possibly illegal turn. So I'm not gonna bring that
Fair
up.
enough.
But um, I had a vast amount of experiences from we saw some racism. It wasn't as point blank most of the time because I just feel like when people like that are voicing their opinions, they're not going to voice it around us.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? They're usually cowards, generally speaking. They won't lash
Yeah.
out unless they're in a group, you know what I mean? Or, they feel safe that way. Or
Yeah.
when they outnumber someone like 14 to 1, then they'll talk shit.
Yeah.
Um, but we had a couple occasional, some dude throwing out Zig Hale at a fucking show or something like that. It didn't happen routinely by any means.
Okay.
That we saw, but it happened a couple occasions where
Yeah.
there was just some stupidity, and then of course there was just legitimate stupidity. Like we were playing a show in Virginia at this place called the Nora, really nice place, and out back, you know, um, putting myself away. I was signing some stuff for some people, drumsticks or whatever. And this dude comes up to me with a drumstick that I had thrown out and asked me to sign it for him. I go, yeah, sure, no problem. And he goes to me, how do you play drums like that when you're black? And I just looked at him and I was like, is this for real right now? Is this really fucking happening? And I kind of came at him, well, first I got opposable thumbs, so we can start there.
Hmm.
But after talking to him for like 5 minutes, I realized he wasn't really racist. He was just really
Yeah.
stupid. Like he was literally like that was a legitimate question for him.
Yeah.
Like, how do you play drums like that when you're black? Like, there's a different skill set for black drummers
Hmm.
than white drummers. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to him that somebody black could even attempt to play these things. I really want to educate him and be like, yo, dude, and I know how this is gonna sound. All the best drummers are black. Period. I said it, and I stick by it. Fuck it. I'm just gonna put that out there, you know. And people can contest, and there's plenty of good white drummers out there. I'm not saying there's not, but the best of the
Yeah.
best. You don't
Who
want to challenge me on this topic. For those of
who
you out there who want to, I will shut it down, and it will be
who would you
embarrassing.
put who would you put as like your top three? I think these are like the best drummers.
All right. Well, I've been, people have asked me this question for years, and I
Yeah.
really it's really the hardest question to answer because there's literally so many criteria now as I look
Yeah.
at it as far as creating a best drummer. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to say who's the best because one way to look at the best is like who's the most well-rounded, who has the
Hmm.
largest range of skill sets,
Okay.
then there's, you know, obvious kind of personal preferences like
Hmm.
do you like dudes that hit the hardest? Do you like dudes with the heaviest groove? Do you like dudes
Yeah.
that are the shreddiest or, just shred all the time and go crazy all over the place? Me, I respect technical proficiency,
Hmm.
but feel and creativity is more
Hmm.
the criteria for me as far as great drummers are concerned. Because I feel like at a certain point, just speed and technical proficiency is something that any fool can do if you just spend enough
Mm.
time doing. Like
Okay.
I see all these guys playing like a 300 BPM, like obviously, but it's like the same fills, it's like the same blast beat patterns, it's
Mhm.
like the same shit over and over again. And they're not really musicians. Like I like
Mm.
drummers that are musicians. Like they have context and they know what to play, how to play it. They have excellent note choice, picking
Mhm.
cymbal swells and being musical and dynamic. Like that's what makes a great drummer for me. Um,
Okay.
which is the reason, like, all right, like for metal, I loved Vinnie Paul's playing a lot because one, he's just a beast. He hit hard. He had technical proficiency, but
Mhm.
he picked where to use it. So I felt like he was very tasteful. Um, his groove, untouchable as far as
Mhm.
all
Oh
that goes,
yeah.
which is one of the main reasons I have, seeing Charlie play that stuff. It's like Charlie is a technically proficient player, an absolutely
Yeah.
great drummer. But he ain't that, but very
Mm.
few people are what Vinny was.
Right.
So that's, it's hard to replicate someone like that. You know what I
Right.
mean? It is like, and I'm not putting anybody down like a Raymond Herrera where it's like, this is just a machine type of feeling. Like, just regurgitate the notes. It's
Mhm.
easier to do that than to regurgitate a feeling. And
Right.
that's what basically the chemistry between him and Daryl is what
Mhm.
you're hearing in those records.
Right.
Obviously everybody was super talented in that band, but when you break it right down to the nitty gritty,
Mhm.
it all starts with the chemistry between those two dudes.
Okay.
That's where it begins for me. That's why they're my favorite metal band of all time in the history of metal.
Yeah.
Now, as far as greatest drummers of all time, um, my list pretty much goes something like this. Number one, Billy Cobham. Okay. A lot
Mm.
of people don't know who this guy is. This is a guy that Neil Peart ripped off. And too, fuck Neil Peart. I don't mean that in the baddest of bad ways, but I mean that in the way where everybody gives him all this credit and they have no idea who Billy Cobham is because he did what Elvis did. He stole from somebody really good that was black and then whitewashed it to the world and sold it.
Okay.
That's basically what happened. Billy Cobham is like Neil Peart with soul.
Okay.
Okay, so Neil Peart was kind of like he's technically proficient, very technically proficient. He's like a
Yeah.
robot, you know what I mean? Not legitimately like a robot, but you get what I'm saying. He's
Right.
very stiff, but that was his style. Now Billy Cobham is like 80 times more technically proficient, but he's
Mm.
so greasy. Like he had that swing, that funk, that intangible quality
Hmm.
about his playing that
All right.
is just ridiculous. Um, if we're gonna go do the whole Succession, I gotta go Dennis Chambers right after that. Some people know who he is nowadays. Some people maybe not so much. But again, another guy that is beyond technically proficient. Okay, he can play anything the fuck he wants, anytime he wants, without a thought.
Mm.
In any meter with anyone. But when it
Hmm.
boils down to it, he's still got that groove. It's just there.
Okay.
And that's to me, especially as time went on with my playing, that became much more important to me than, being that fast or being playing this many notes. Like
Hmm.
I wanted to have a solid groove and I wanted to be more musical.
Hmm.
Um Now as far as we keep going down the line, there's so many that I could
Sure.
list all over the place. From Jack DeJohnette, the jazz player, to Claude Stubblefield from James Brown, to Louis
Mhm.
Bellson, who was a white guy, by the way. He's a jazz guy. I love Benny Greb. That dude is sick. There's a guy by the name of Isaac Jamba who I've been studying a lot. I've had a couple conversations with him actually online
Hmm.
because we're endorsed by the same stick company and the same drumming
Okay.
companies. But I kind of message him on Instagram because he does all Brazilian jazz stuff, which I found to be some of the hardest shit I've ever tried to play in my entire life. And
You,
that goes along to, with playing with sugar and every other thing that I've learned over the course of the
do you
years.
know there's a Brazilian grindcore duo named Test? Have you ever heard them?
Now, I've heard of them, but I actually haven't heard the music.
The
Mostly
drummer,
because I'm not a huge grindcore fan. I was kind of
yeah.
like, a Brutal Truth fan, and then there was a Scottish band
Okay.
that we toured with called Coexist that was actually early grindcore, and the drummer actually sang too. And a lot of
Oh,
people don't know about that band, but they were really something different. You know what I mean? Like it was very noisy, very blasty, very high energy and fast. But
yeah.
a lot of people don't know about that band. They never really blew up or
Yeah.
anything, but they were really entertaining.
The drummer, I've seen a lot of bands play. I've seen Neil Peart play. The drummer from Test, his name is Barada. Um, Probably the best live drummer anyway that I've ever seen. He did stuff that like everybody in the crowd just like stopped and they were like, "What the hell are we seeing?" It was incredible, like adjusting the tautness of the skin, right? Just different styles. You could definitely hear. Probably he probably has a background similar to yourself, where he had a bunch of different styles that he brought into this. Um,
Well, that's
and
a
it
big part
was
of their culture as well. So,
it was
you know.
mind blowing though, seeing like you're saying the differences between, and again, right? No insult to anybody, but more the like robotic regurgitation versus like this like creative, intuitive um output.
Well, I mean, there are guys that I don't want to take away from the creativity it takes to develop
Mm,
certain skills and then learn how to use them. I just
right.
feel like certain people use them in a more organic sort of way and less
Okay.
systematic sort of way. Like
Okay.
Neil Peart was a more systematic person. Like he
Hmm.
developed speed, he developed, knowledge of these different patterns and rhythmic ideas, and then he just okay, I can apply it like this. Like if you
Hmm.
listen to a Rush song, it's like doom 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 doom, following every note and
Yeah.
every little pattern, and there's like no um kind of leading or pulling away. It's just like that's what he does. You know what I mean? And I'm not taking away from that. But when you go and listen to Billy Cobham, it's not just the fact that he's technically proficient and he can play all those patterns. It's the
Hmm.
way that he shapes them and
Okay.
gives them character. You know what I mean? Like it's really hard to explain. It's really one of those things that makes any kind of art, whether it's music or movies or television or whatever the hell it is that you're into, plays
Hmm.
or whatever, anything artistic is going to have eventually a point at which you get to of an intangible quality that makes the hair stand on the back of your neck or makes you feel
Mm,
a certain way, sad, happy, angry, whatever the fuck. Um, and I just feel like there are certain guys that play drums that you can easily detect that quality when they're playing, as opposed to other
okay,
guys where it's like you can easily detect that that quality isn't really there. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
it doesn't mean that they're bad. It's just for me, it's a personal preference where I that's not how I want it to be.
Right. When's
You
the
know,
first time
I that makes sense.
you heard that quality? Like, who was the first drummer that you heard that and you were like, "Holy shit."
Um, that's hard to say, really. That's kind of going back because I mean, there was times I heard it, I just didn't realize it yet.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
that's
I didn't
fair.
really realize what I was hearing until years later. Because I mean,
Okay.
obviously, like my mom was a musician, so I heard a lot of different kinds of music. And she was all over the place from Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton to classical
Mm,
music to Motown shit to she was literally all over the map with it.
yeah.
So obviously I had heard groove, things like that when I was growing up. I just didn't really recognize it for what it was because
Mhm.
I didn't have the knowledge to even understand what I was listening to at
Okay.
that point. You know what I mean? I just know, oh, I like this, snap your fingers like everybody else, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, then after some years of playing, I met some people and different drummers, and you start to learn,
Mm,
little things about what you want to be as a player, and then how to capture it. Obviously, the earliest stages, it's fun, but it's all skill development. Like you're
mhm.
learning things that are more difficult, you're learning patterns that are more difficult, you're developing better timing, you're learning how to read, you're pushing speed and endurance, those types of things. Like you need to
Yeah.
build the necessary skills so that you can get to a point where you're comfortable in the knowledge that you've acquired to
Mhm.
create things without second guessing yourself all the time.
Okay.
Obviously that's the goal. But I had a friend Scott um, who was in a band called For the Love of that used to practice in the same rehearsal space. This place called Big Noise Rehearsal Studios in North Brunswick in New Jersey,
Mhm.
and we had heard them. And he's to this day, I still say he's got one of the most solid grooves of a lot of drummers that I've seen throughout my entire
Hmm.
career. And he never really like he didn't blow up on a professional level. I mean, he's just a drummer that loves drums more than anything.
Hmm.
Um, I saw him. I saw Ken from Candiria,
Mm.
um, who when I saw that shit had me all fucked up because he was
Yeah.
a beast, you know.
Yeah.
And then of course, discovering stuff like Herbie Hancock and Dennis Chambers, and then obviously once I started to find these people out, you start learning more and digging deeper into the
Mm.
into the history of all these different where if he learned that, where he did get it from, and you go see what they
Yeah.
liked and where they heard it from, and that kind of took me into the Elvin Jones and the Clyde Stubblefields and the
Okay.
Jack DeJohnette's and Tony Williams and shit like that. Um, but I didn't get there for a while because obviously when you're young and you're listening to metal, all you want to do is play fast and you want to play crazy shit all the time, and you don't really see anything past that. Like, and I mean, initially, I think you can hear that on a lot of our music, like going from Out of Misery and like Reject the Sickness, especially. It's all over the place. It's not
Yeah.
really songs exactly per se. It's more of an amalgamation of parts with
Okay.
repeating sections. Because we were just like, we just want to be heavy. We want to be the heaviest. Um, and I mean, at the time, I mean, when we put out Reject the Sickness initially, there was no albums around that were like that we knew about. I mean, there was kind of albums that had similar qualities, but for the what later became metalcore concept,
Mhm.
you know, there there was no albums like that. I mean, the closest thing I would say was probably maybe like Leeway, or was kind of on
Mm.
that sort of level, but not as heavy. I don't think. But they had that sort of metallic sound, even though they were kind of like a hardcore band.
Yeah.
They had a very Anthrax, crunchy, distorted sort of sound that hardcore bands didn't have at that time.
Mhm.
And our sound was basically designed to be as brutal and attack heavy as we could possibly make it at the
Yeah.
time. Um, and obviously there was other bands that were starting to come with similar ideas, like Shadows Fall was around that
Mhm.
time. Killswitch didn't exist yet at that point. Uh, Unearth wasn't around
Mm.
yet.
Right.
Um, Khmer was around, but they were still doing like rap metal at that point, like
Mm.
straight up. The Adidas jumpsuit type of shit was going on
Yeah.
for them at that
Yeah.
time still.
Yeah.
Um, we were actually rehearsing in a space not too long after that with Dillinger.
Okay.
So a lot of the stylistically, I think, was rubbing off because you're just around each other. You're playing the same shitholes in the same Legion halls,
Yeah.
every weekend essentially, or going to see each other play at those same places. Um, but in general, like that kind of style wasn't really going around yet. It didn't exist really yet.
Mhm.
So it was um it was an interesting time to kind of gauge what we were trying to do versus what was going on. And there was actually times I literally think Dallas and me and Doctor sat there after drinking 2 or 3 2 liters of Mountain Dew and drinking unlimited coffee. We are just literally yelling numbers at each other, like 7 9 7 5 5 11 7 9 7. Let's do that. Like, how brutal can we make this shit? Come on, like. And then by the time Determination came around, I was like, all right, like we need to refocus. And we all had different headspaces and different experiences. Like, actually, about that time is when I met Terry Bozzio.
Mm.
I helped do sound for a clinic for Terry Bozzio, and I got to talk with him for a little while. And I literally said to him, like, I feel like I'm in a slump, and like, what would you suggest? You know what this motherfucker said to me? This fucking guy said to me, "Well, Corey, why don't you get an ice cream or go to the movies?" And at the time, I was like, "Yo, what the fuck kind of advice is this motherfucker's giving me?" But in that same conversation, he taught me a little bit about um, kind of just relaxing yourself and taking yourself out of the same
Mm.
headspace, because drummers often, what traps you is the fact that you there's a certain blue collar work ethic when it comes to drums, because you have certain um, duties to perform, right? So, what are your primary objectives? One, you need to be able to keep time.
Mhm.
Two, you need to hold down the band and basically direct everything.
Mm.
So, these are your first responsibilities: hold shit together, keep time consistently, cover all the patterns.
Mm.
And especially in metal, a lot of things are, double bass oriented or whatever. The rhythmic aggression is a big part of metal.
Mm.
Obviously, drumming, you naturally have to respond to that energy and cover the rhythmic aggression by matching the patterns in some way.
Okay.
Um, so it basically kind of leads you down this path of repetition, because you need to do that in order to be comfortable, especially at excessive speeds,
Mm.
to do that under control.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And
Okay.
consistently all the time. So it's hard to then get out of your head and out of that these ideas of repetition and try
Mhm.
to do new things. because naturally your body, muscle memory, and your mind just snaps back into what works and what's safe. So in talking to him, he was a big proponent of clearing your mind and just
Okay.
kind of getting a different mindset. And that's why he told me to go have the ice cream and go see a movie. And he did educate me on um, kind of learning about harmonies with toms and guitars and matching things like when I did determination, I actually tried to tune the drum kit is in
Hmm.
the kick drum is literally in drop D, the way that the guitars are tuned. And then I kind of like
Determination. That is my favorite God Forbid album. I've had that album for, I mean, since it came out. Um, I I don't know what it is about it. I don't know. I find it like extremely cathartic, like hearing the music. It seems, I don't know. It's just for me, it's a very visual experience. I can really just see a lot of things. Obviously, I don't know what you guys were putting out there, but I know for me, Determination, I was like, this is an album that I will always keep with me. That's a permanent part of the collection now. But I'd heard, and this may not be true, I'd heard or read somewhere that not the band's favorite or somebody in the band really didn't love the album or something like that.
well, I'm gonna tell you that um I think we all like the album just fine.
Mm,
But I mean, I'm sure anybody in a band will tell you, the more albums you put out, every album you put out, of course you're pouring your heart and soul into something. So you
hmm.
feel absolutely great about it at the time. And then after it's done, there's always things that you would have
Sure.
changed and you go through that for a period of time. But if you flash forward years and years forward, um, I sort of developed a different appreciation for that album for what it was and what we accomplished at that time
Hmm.
and where my mind was at the like I listen to those songs now and I listen to stuff that I was playing and some stuff is like really cool and then other stuff I'm thinking like what was I thinking about when I fucking and honestly I don't really remember other than honestly we were just doing stuff that was so new to all of us
Hmm.
that you kind of just figuring it out as you go along.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like we weren't really established in any specific style yet.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, like we knew we were all fans of metal, but all fans of a lot of other music.
Hmm.
But at that point, you know, I think Reject the Sickness was a step out of just sort of being influenced by other bands where you're just kind of like taking little ideas from all these different bands and then kind of utilizing them
Yeah.
and also sort of all right we've attained this level of skills now we're just going to showcase it
Hmm.
all the time because that's what we know to do and then
Yeah.
determination kind of became the next step where all right now we're going to choose when to use certain skills when learning how to use space and melody to convey um feelings and or message over the course of an album and thinking a little bit bigger about how to do that
Hmm.
over a song and over an album.
Yeah.
You know, being a little bit more in touch with dynamics and um, being a little more structurally sound too.
Yeah.
That was the first record where I think all those kind of components came into play. And then obviously as time went along, um, I, all the records sound different, but the
Hmm.
principles are the same after Determination. I think like
Hmm.
Determination basically was like, hold on a second, here we go. Charging issue. Um, Determination was basically between reject and determination. It was basically like between those two albums was like the proving ground for every other album that we made after that. Like if you were to combine
Hmm.
the concepts of those two records as far as um skill, dynamics, emotion, musicality, all those things,
Mhm.
and you combine those two records, all of that is basically encompassed in every record after those two.
Yeah.
The qualities of both of those two are encompassed in every record after that. So
Y Hmm.
I think at that point, those two records, we needed to develop certain tools and skills and range really, from brutal to extremely melodic and dark to, you know, being able to change energy and shit in a song. It's not easy. A lot of bands get stuck. They
Hmm.
make one album and then they make that album for the rest of their fucking life. And in certain situations, that makes sense. Like if you're AC/DC, yeah, you make the same fucking record forever
Yeah.
because you do it better than anybody else. Or, you're like Aerosmith, or if we're gonna downscale it from there, like Hatebreed, for instance. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
Hatebreed has some different riffs and different things, but their design is basically the same. Production may change for
Mhm.
the better or worse, depending on how you feel about it. Like me, I always feel like those motherfuckers know how to put together a record that sounds good
Oh,
for
yeah, absolutely.
what they're trying to achieve. Um, but I think a lot of bands, they just get stuck, and then they don't know where to go or how to move on, or and especially in today's market, they're absolutely petrified about doing anything different
Mm.
because they're worried about losing, fans. They're worried about, losing relevance or any of the things that help keep a band sort of like in the eye and keep them moving and keep the offers coming in.
Yeah.
Um, Bands get shook. And I felt like,
Mhm.
maybe that's a reason why we weren't bigger is because we just kept doing different shit and we would lose fans and gain fans with every
Yeah.
with every record because everybody wanted us to do the record previous. Like you don't know how many people and like you know, I'm the last one here in New Jersey, so I hear it all the fucking time. And quite honestly, I'm a little sick of it. But at the same time, I appreciate the fact that people still like our shit. But it's
Yeah.
like, there's people that are like, Determination was the last record, I really, really liked by you guys. And like, why can't you guys make another Determination? Then you got people like, oh man, Reject the Sick, that was the shit, man. You guys are rejected. Why can't you make another album like Reject the Sickness? Or, then there's the Gone Forever crowd, and then there's the
Yeah.
Constitution crowd. And it's like,
Yeah.
and it goes on. You know what I mean? And it's like every album, there's a host of people that say like that's the best God forbid record. There's never like a unified response, like we
Oh,
all like this one record. Like every Metallica fan loves Master of Puppets. There's no Metallica
sure.
fan that doesn't like Master of Puppets. Like I don't think we ever had a record where every God forbid fan was like, I like that record. I think
Okay.
maybe I mean I could be wrong about that. I just felt like we had um a changing fan base and we had constants. There was people that stayed with us for the whole journey
Mhm.
until now. But I felt like there's a lot of people that fell off because they wanted to like, especially after we did Gone Forever. People just want,
Yeah.
please make another Gone Forever. Please make another Gone Forever. And when
Hmm.
Constitution came out, it had a lot of similar qualities, but it definitely in many ways wasn't as aggressive. It was definitely more melodic based. It was more, scaled down in certain
Mhm.
directions, so, that throws people off and they weren't really ready
Yeah.
for that shit. And then, you know, um, when we did Constitution also, it's like, there was more singing and more melodic vocals going on. And then, of course, we heard about that. And I would say if we did it badly, then people should bitch. But I don't think it's not like we came out and then all of a sudden everything's getting auto tuned and the vocal sound fucked up or anything
Right.
like that. We added textures because we felt like in order to write better songs, this is what we needed to do. It
Right.
wasn't like, oh, we have to do this if we want to get these type of fans. It was like, we want to write songs like this. How are we going to achieve it?
Well,
So
and
what tools do we need?
yeah, and I lived in Jersey until about 12 years ago. I lived there pretty much my whole life until then. And I felt like one of the things that was a huge advantage is every tour came through there, pretty much every style of music came through there,
Mm,
right? 80s and 90s, right? My childhood, rap, hip hop, all that was huge, blowing up then. And there's always going to be a special spot for me in that. So you hear all this different stuff and constantly changing. And that's why, like, when we were talking on Twitter about like, oh, how cool would it be to see like you guys tour with Kitty and Shadows Fall? Like that's right. That's a time that represented a lot of new stuff, like you were saying, that it'd be cool to bring that now and like let people have a fresh experience of it. Because I don't know what it was like for you growing up hearing all of these different things, but for me, um, it was so cool to see so many different musical aspects in this tiny little area. Because you could go to New York, you could go to Philly, you could go to,
mm.
wherever pretty quickly, but I felt incredibly spoiled, and I still feel that way. I felt,
I
you
felt
met
like there
so
was
many.
a lot of talent going on
Yeah,
in from I would say from probably like I would say from like 84 to like 2001, 2002.
okay,
During that segment of time, the explosion of talent musically that was coming out of the East Coast was ridiculous.
right.
I mean, talent in general, if you really want to look at it, if you want to look at like TV stars and movie stars from Bruce Willis to Danny DeVito to, the
Yeah,
list goes on and on. Joe Pesci, um, to music, you had everything, you from Mobb Deep to Red Band to Wu
yeah,
Tang to Eric B. and
yeah,
Rakim to on a smaller scale, on our scale was, Candiria, Dillinger Escape Plan, Us, E Town. Um,
yeah,
there was just a lot of bands. I mean, obviously, there were bands, like Overkill and Skid Row, and that already existed and that were out. But I'm just saying for the bands that were coming out. But I mean, obviously, they were coming out at that time as well during that period between like
yeah,
84 to 2001. That like 17, 18-year period out here, it was unstoppable the amount of talent that was coming out of the
yeah.
East Coast. It was
It was
ridiculous.
absurd.
It
And
really
I
was.
did you I'm sure you've been to the Stone Pony, right, in Asbury Park?
Like a billion times.
Right. The I've seen the Deftones twice. Oddly enough, the second time I saw them, they opened for Kiss. I don't know who put that together, but the first time I saw the
People that wanted
Deftones,
more money.
the first time I saw them was in the Stone Pony, and I was just looking at. I had a few photos from it, and the crowd is like piled up, and Chino's got his hand on the roof, and he's like singing down to this mountain of bodies. And to think like, holy shit, we had that come through. Where I'm not a huge Deftones fan, but I appreciate the scope of that band. Like
Mm.
I don't feel like we see that much anymore. And I go to a lot of shows. I love the small venues. Um, but I don't feel like it's quite the same, and I don't think it's something that can't be, but I don't know, it doesn't seem to feel that way.
Well, I'll tell you why it doesn't feel that way. And I mean, I agree with you 1,000%. And I think it's not one thing, it's a number of things. It's a
Mhm,
cumulative pattern. Um, one reason I feel like it's not like that is because the same sense of community does not exist. You know
mm,
what I mean? Like, even shows we weren't playing, we used to go to shows like other friends of bands,
mhm,
be friends with other dudes in bands, and you go to their shows. Like it was like fun. Like every weekend you were
mhm,
going to shows. Like literally every weekend there were shows.
yeah,
And that's another part of it is now it's hard to have shows at different places every weekend with a bunch of bands because those places don't exist. And people don't want to take the risk to be throwing shows at, Legion halls and fire stations anymore. Like literally, I don't know how many Legion show halls we played, or with a lot of bands from Sick of the Ball to H2O to the list goes on to Ag Front and blah blah blah. But there was a lot. There was a
yeah,
lot, and all those shows never had less than like 8 bands on them. Like all the time, and it was a event. every time you went to a then hardcore show, and there wasn't really much of a metal scene going on when we first got started. So that's all the
Mm,
shows that there were to play. And there was a lot of places, and then the ones at little shitholes like Plum Street Pub,
mm,
or Six County College had used to get funding to have shows. That's where we
yeah.
started playing in front of like a couple hundred people. Was at Middlesex County College. Um,
Mm,
but so that's another reason is just lack of shows and venues. Like everybody used to just throw shows. Like
yeah.
if you were in a band, you got together with some other people in the band. Somebody knew somebody whose uncle was at the Legion Hall, and they say, "Hey, can we have a show here?" Blah 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 blah. And it kind of, there was still fights and all that other foolishness,
Yeah.
but there was a larger sense of community. Um, I felt from definitely from the hardcore scene at that time.
Mm,
But I mean, I also realized later on in my career that a lot of that's just bullshit. It's just people. I mean, it's just like, it's just like Christianity. Some people live it, some people just talk about it. And,
yeah.
every hardcore band, oh, it's all about hardcore unity. It's about a brotherhood. It's about a family. No, it ain't. I have to, more than half them motherfuckers is lying. Now, I'm not saying they're all lying. Like, like dudes from Scott from Terror, like that dude is living it for real. He means it for
For
real.
real.
That's a genuine good human being that believes the shit that he is saying. Now, there's a lot of other motherfuckers out there that spit all that shit, but the minute they find any excuse to punch you in the face or, fuck with you because they're wrong with their crew or whatever is going on, they
Yeah.
take full advantage of that because that's what's really important to them. Having other people bow down to them and kiss their ass is
Mm,
far more important than any of that unity and brotherhood and family that they be preaching up on the
mm,
stage. That's bullshit. The real shit
mm,
is they enjoy having their ass kissed and they enjoy being feared and worshipped more
yeah.
than they give a shit about any of the message that they claim to truly
Mm,
support. It's just words. You know what I mean? But so that's a big part of it. The other part of it is um you don't really see bands hanging out to watch other bands anymore, like on a local level. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like they'll play and they'll just kind of like be standoffish or not make friends with the other bands at the show. Or a lot of times they'll just leave. Like, okay, I
I've
played
seen
on your
that.
show. Fuck it, I'm out. And
Yeah.
that's a huge mistake. And I've told several young bands that I've encountered and worked with, like, you want to start something, you want to get a squad together, start going to see, make friends with other bands, go to their shows. They'll come to your
Mm,
shows. Before you know it, you'll be 15, 20 deep supporting each other. And that will bring other people because people see, hey, there's these 20 people here. Let's go see this. I heard this about this band. And you will
mm,
develop a scene through just going to see your friends play. It's
yeah.
just that simple. But bands don't really do it. You know what I mean? I feel like it's just the sense of apathy just because, all right, it's like, well, I could talk to somebody online, I could watch a video of them online or whatever, I could watch their YouTube, whatever.
Yeah.
um it doesn't really motivate a lot of proactive thought and action.
Mm.
Like we used to go to shows with like a Walkman and play God for, like, make people, like, stop people, like, yo, you heard God forbid? No, put on these headphones. We was
Nice.
out there hustling for real. We roll up on anybody. Here, listen to this guy here, listen to this CD. It's like people now, they don't really have that hustle kind of mentality. They're just like, oh, we'll throw some more shit up online, we'll post another, we'll
Mm,
boost the post and we'll sell it, we'll get people into it like that. And I'm not saying that that doesn't work, but if you want to have a solid scene and that kind of connection to build off of, one, it's gonna start connecting people, which our entire society seems to be basically geared around people not connecting in a physical manner. Everything's based on, you know, connecting via internet, whether it's messaging or video chatting or whatever the fuck, video
yeah.
games, whatever it's going to be. Um, so you don't have that camaraderie going. The other thing about it that I really firmly believe is that it takes away a lot of the healthy competition, right? So
Mhm.
I know for us, when we'd see bands, you go out and play a show and you get your ass handed to you, you know what I mean, from bands, from dudes that you are friends with. You're like, yeah, yeah, you got that one, but you know what? We're gonna come back to the next show, fucking come even harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that healthy competition builds up a scene. Like, it's like when like I said, I brought that band for love. We saw for the love of like, yo, man, these dudes are crazy. We need to practice more. Then we saw Candiers. Like, how often do you guys practice? They're like 15, 16 hours a week. We're like, yo, we need to practice 18 hours a week or something. We need to figure this shit out. And it was friendly competition, but I think because of that, everybody had to come out stronger. You had to write better material.
Sure.
You had to write a heavier breakdown. You had to write a better thrash part. You had to write a harder two step, and you had to make it all work. Um, and now you don't really see that because there's no real drive to do anything else other than what everybody else is doing.
Hmm.
Like you go to a lot of shows, and it's like you go to a show, and it's like, okay, now we got all the deathcore bands, and it's
Hmm.
the same, basically the same two styles of riff, the whole fucking set for three or
Yeah.
four or five or eight bands or whatever it's going to be. Then occasionally you'll see just death metal bands. So to just be like,
Hmm.
you have a death fest here or there, and it's just like mind numbing death metal for hours on end,
Yeah.
which I like some death metal, but there comes a limit for me where it's just all right. Like it's everything is just very like this is what's hot right now. I either don't have people don't have the creativity or the desire or whatever you want to call it to break any of the patterns. So it's
Hmm.
just the same shit. And you see it all around. It's the same reason like I'm not trying to take anything from certain bands, but bands like Lorna Shore, okay? For
Yeah.
me at a certain point, if everything's heavy, nothing's heavy anymore because now it's just monotonous. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's like every band has the same remedy for songwriting. We're gonna write a kind of death techie sort of part, then we're gonna slow it down and make it heavy, and then we're gonna
Hmm.
ultimately slow it down ridiculously to make it heavier, and we're gonna tune everything down to G, B, whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
And there's 1,000 bands like that. Now some of them get more popular than others, but you got so many bands trapped in that same cycle that it's ridiculous. Like it's taken all the spirit, I think, of creativity and heavy music out of it because now everybody's like, okay, well, these Lauren Shore, Biotis Murder, these bands are probably we'll just do that. Falling out in
Hmm.
reverse is popular, so now there's 1,000 bands. We'll just do that, and the scene is sorely lacking in the camaraderie and friendly competition that develops bands into doing
Hmm.
more and breaking ground and having
Yeah.
more versatility. Now everybody's shook and they just walk in the shadow of other bands. And
I will.
that's
I will agree to that.
and that's to me is it's just sad, really. It's sad because for me, a lot of this music was about that creativity. It was about being able to break and cross all these lines because the rule was there are no rules. There's one rule:
Right.
kick ass. That's it.
Right. I will say I've walked out of more shows slash sets in the past 2 years than I ever have in my entire life. One, I felt more comfortable doing it like, hey, I'm done with this. But two, it just got to a point where I'm like, I know not every musician is a performer. I get the difference, but I I can only watch so many sets of guys like just standing there, kind of banging their heads, playing, and like that's it, right? And like you said, at a certain point, right? If I've seen 4 or 5 death metal bands in a night, what's really separating them? And it does get hard. And I made it a point to go see a bigger variety of music this year. And you know, it's a crapshoot. You never know exactly who's going to perform what that night, how they're going to do, how you're going to be feeling. But I know as a music fan, um, my desire for kind of the depth is definitely increasing. I probably like more music now than I ever did before, but at the same time, the stuff that I'm really drawn to, that pool is getting a little bit smaller at the moment. because I'm noticing more similarities and things like that. And you ask people, "Hey, what are you listening to lately?" And you hope to get some difference, but I don't know, it's been real hit or miss lately for me. I can't think of that many newer or new to me bands that I'm like, this needs to be on my list, you know? It's been harder.
I definitely don't disagree with you. I also feel like a lot of it is because you either get, songwriting that is just like, all right, it's just the ABC format, right?
Mm,
And there's a lot of bands that are metal or metal adjacent, shall we say,
yeah.
that that's the format. But I mean, and I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to simple structures or catchy stuff by any means. I just
Mhm,
feel like the 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 devil is in the details, especially the simpler stuff that you write. Like,
mhm,
obviously, if you're writing a bunch of technical shit all the time, the details sort of almost take care of themselves as long as you're,
mhm,
playing in key and you can add and count. Like you can make everything sort
yeah,
of match up. When you have to utilize space and melody and within a simple structure, it becomes significantly harder to keep the music interesting and
mm,
have character. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, for instance, if we're talking about catchy mainstream music, like you have Kid Rock and then you have Soundgarden. You know what I mean? Both are
right,
very catchy,
mm,
both super catchy. But I'm gonna
right,
go ahead and say that Soundgarden is probably the more interesting of the two if you're listening to it, as far as textures and
absolutely.
dynamics and their attention to detail is what made their very catchy music so very significant.
Mhm,
And I feel like that those qualities of musical integrity as well as the work ethic to put in
mm,
um, so much energy in all the details that gave the music character have sort of just fainted away because a lot of people it's especially the younger they get now, it seems to me it's like either they want to be super techy or they just don't give a shit about musical integrity at all. They just want to kind of write the next banger. You know what
mm,
I mean?
yeah,
And I think that, you know, the blending of those two ideas is when really great music happens.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like you come into
mhm,
contact with people who like Van Halen, right? It's like there's a band full of talent, dudes that could basically do anything they wanted to do. And they
mhm,
wrote a ton of catchy stuff that still had a bunch of technical shit going on,
mhm,
but they managed to combine those. Or the Police, there's another,
yeah,
fantastic example of dudes with outrageous amounts of talent. Or the Eagles. I was just talking about this with my friend's his father-in-law the other day because he's a guitar player and we get
mm.
into like physical discussions and we are talking about that. I was like, the Eagles that was unfair. Those motherfuckers had too much talent. That should be a fucking crime. But it's also from the age that they came in. There's another example. It's like they came from an age where all those bands, whether it was them, whether it was fucking Queen or the fucking Who, or all these bands that were around at that time, or even get into Pink Floyd and Jim Croce or the Traveling Wilburys, you had all these fantastic
Oh, yeah,
songwriters, and a lot of them knew each other and they pushed each other, just like Prince and Morris Day. It's like you had two
mm,
dudes coming up at the same time, pushing each other to be better. And like now it's like there is no pushing to be better per se. It's just like, all
mm,
right, well, we can write more risks that get people beat up than you can.
mm,
And like a lot of guys, like that's a lot of bands, that's their entire objective. They just want to write music that people will beat each other up to. And I mean, hey, if that's your objective, I totally get it. I understand that, and I understand the thrill of looking out at a crazy pit and seeing people, just going nuts for what you're doing. But I think there's a point at which where if that is your only objective, then you shouldn't really be playing music. You should just be
Mhm.
like a boxing promoter or something. Like do that. If you want to just watch people beat the shit out of each other, then go be a UFC promoter or something like that. Like just create fucking backyard wrestling matches or some shit like that. Do something where violence is the principal, you know, concept in what you're doing, and that's the be all end all. But lead the music to people who want to write music.
Do you think, because I know, right, I see, we talk about movies a lot on Twitter there. Do you think, is this something that you see as like kind of stuck in the music world, or do you think it applies to like actors or whatever other artists?
I
I don't know how much you can speak to any of this, obviously, but
Well, I mean, I feel like it depends on what. Like, I feel like the creativity is so wide open as far as like off Broadway stuff and plays and things like that, because there's always going to be um sort of this avant-garde potential to doing art
Mhm,
of that nature, or even like paintings and sculpture and things like that. I always feel like it's more wide open. Now
mm,
when it gets to TV shows and movies and music, which are kind of like more mainstream forms of entertainment, that like no one does not acknowledge the existence of watching a TV show or movies or listening to some kind of music. You know what I mean?
right.
Everybody doesn't look at paintings or sculptures, or you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
basically, you could say everybody listens to music. Everybody has watched movies. Everybody's watched TV. So that's what I
sure.
mean by sort of mainstream entertainment forms. I feel like the problem is too is just our point in history, right? Like
Mm,
everything has been so done that what do you see all the time? Everybody's just trying to reboot shit. And I
mm,
mean, to be fair, I feel like a lot of these bands, like Knock Loose or Code Orange, they're just reboots of bands that I used to see at Legion Halls, like almost identically. Like I listen to
yeah,
those albums, like man, I heard this album back in '98.
hmm,
From Shrek 691 or fucking, it's like the riffs are not really any different,
yeah,
but it's just a different generation discovering it. It's kind of like Greta Von Fleet coming out and people, young people go, man, I never heard anything like this, but we've all heard Led Zeppelin. Like older people, like, yeah, this sounds like
yeah,
they're ripping off Led Zeppelin. But there's a lot of people who are younger and never, never gave a fuck about Led Zeppelin, don't have any intention of giving a fuck about Led Zeppelin. That are like, man,
yeah,
Greta Von Fleet is the best band in the universe that has ever fucking existed in all the history of time. But it's perspective. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like, and I totally get that too. It's like obviously when we were young, your parents would say, "Oh, this sounds like that," or especially during the hip hop era, like a lot of hip hop, they were using Motown samples and stuff from
mm,
the stylistics and the Commodores and shit like that. A lot of those samples, that's where it all came from. Was that era and the doo wop era. So obviously your parents hear all that shit and they hear the hooks that they're sampling. They're going, "Hey, that ain't nothing but this, baby." Blah 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 blah. And you're like, "Yeah, get out of here. You know what you're talking about, old person." But now we're kind of the old people, and they're going, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Not good. That's a brand new shit." I'm like, "Brand new shit." I've been hearing them same riffs since 1996, man. Like, what you talking about? But I feel that's kind of what's missing right now, and that's why you're not seeing um
mm,
that same kind of level of bands coming out, because
mm,
there's no bands really one hanging out with each other and going to see each other and making that kind of effort. Two, out going to shows and hustling their music on people in person,
mm,
which is another big part of it. Three, um, obviously there's no real message or meaning behind any of the music other than I want somebody to get beat up, or I want little girls to cry so that I can whine with them, because there's a lot of that going on too. I'm not a big fan of. It's just, but I get it. I understand. Like if you're feeling some way and you want to make some emo ass music, hey, make some emo ass music, but make sure you're making it for that reason. Don't make it just because okay, well, these 30 bands are famous and
Right.
they're making emo music. So now I'm gonna make emo music because I want to be famous too.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, you're more than likely going to very much let yourself down, embracing that as a as a
Yeah.
concept. But also, you're just probably gonna make shitty music, or you're just gonna be make some retread ass shit. And that's what a
Yeah.
lot of this is going on now. It's like nobody has, you know, any legitimate creative push. It's just like I want to be just like this other band, and that's all there is to it. And like, and
Hmm.
I understand that feeling though. Like obviously when I first heard like I want to they sound just like Slayer, and then you go on, you hear other things like, oh, I want to sound like Meshuggah, I want to sound like At the Gates, I want to sound like Foo Fighters, I want to sound like Opeth, whatever the case may be. But eventually you kind of get to a point where I was like, I just want to really I want to write amazing songs.
Hmm.
And I've learned so much from all these bands that have wrote amazing songs. I'd love to incorporate aspects of what they do and make it my own and put it into whatever is going to come out of me. But it's not for the purpose of being just like those bands. It's
Yeah.
for the purpose of I enjoyed those bands. I learned a lot from them. Now, how can I make something great too? And I don't think that these bands aspire to make anything great, a lot of these bands. And it's showing in the mediocrity that we are surrounded by. And that's more than likely why you haven't like had a band where you're just like, God damn it, this is what
Hmm.
I've been waiting for a long because I mean, I am open to the concept of hearing something that blows me away. I really
Yeah.
want it to happen. Um, I'd say the last band that probably really blew me away was Gojira, and they're not new by any means anymore.
No.
Um, I heard this band Greyhaven,
Yeah.
which is pretty dope. I don't know if you've heard them. I saw them
Yep.
live in Vegas, and I was like at this little club with Fire from the Gods. I saw them opening for Fire from the
Oh,
Gods,
okay.
and I was like, yeah, man, these dudes are this is cool. Like, so there are those bands out there, but I just
Yeah.
feel like they're so alone right now because like normally throughout history what happens there's clusters, right? Like there
Hmm.
was the whole Seattle cluster as Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Stone Temple Pilots and Alice in Chains and Nirvana. Like we're talking about here, it's going on. It's like, there's Dillinger, there was us, it's Overkill, and then before that was Overkill and Skid Row and blah 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 blah.
Hmm.
Twisted Sister, blah blah.
Hmm.
Bon Jovi. There was always there's clusters. There was a Texas cluster, and New Orleans cluster. That whole sort of
Oh, yeah.
area from New Orleans to Texas. You Pantera, Exhumed, Exorder, Crowbar, fucking Soylent Green, Goat
Yeah.
Horror, Hissing Razors. Like all these bands were kind of in that area in that cluster. Then Florida, what'd you have? You had Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Death,
Hmm.
Obituary. Yeah, all these bands. Like there was another
Yep.
cluster. Where's that cluster at now? Where's that spot? There, it doesn't exist.
I think I know the Midwest has something going on with a lot of the screamo type, right? Like Frail Body, a band that I saw last year. They I saw them, I love them. They were really fun, they were really enjoyable, and it just got me like a little bit further into that scene. But I don't really know the Midwest that well. I couldn't, rattle off like Florida, you think about death metal, you can rattle off 10 death metal bands
Yeah.
easily. I couldn't do the same, but I'm also not very familiar with the music. Um,
Well,
I'm just kind of getting into it.
I feel like my point is if like when the things were happening here, whether it was hip
Hmm.
hop in the '90s or whatever, because you had so much. I mean, going on
Yeah.
here. Cool G Rap, Wu Tang, fucking Biggie Smalls, Mob Deep,
Hmm.
Redman. The list goes on and on. I feel like when there's a talent cluster like that, regardless of where you are, you're gonna know about it. But
Hmm.
everything
Okay.
is kind of sort of just blended in and becoming so generic that you just don't give a shit. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's like the whole mumble rap culture. Like everything's just about is the bass hitting? Is the
Hmm.
beat hitting? And nobody's really saying shit for the most part. I mean, I'm not saying that
Hmm.
there's no rappers out there that don't have any talent or ain't saying shit. I'm just saying
Right.
that the motherfuckers that actually have something to say and have good production and have all these ingredients have become so few and far between in all
Hmm.
genres of music that you just don't give a shit. Like by the time you do find one that you like, they're only around for a minute because no one has any loyalty to any bands or music anymore. No one's like reading the inlet of the album
Ah.
cover and see where the record was made or who produced it or and that's another big part of this too. It's the same reason why you'll never have another band as big as Metallica or
Mhm.
Aerosmith or ACD. That concept is dead. That is never, ever going to happen again.
Mm.
You will never see another band of that magnitude ever again. Statistically, I feel like it's statistically and mathematically impossible.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Um,
Hmm.
Partially because of technology, partially because some people would say like every fucking kid has ADHD, whatever, and just can't pay attention, which I think is bullshit. Because if I'd have had ADHD when I was a kid, my mom would have slapped the shit out of me. Pay attention. That's how you fix ADHD in the 80s. You know what I mean? You don't pay attention, or you're gonna catch a slap. And it was pretty effective tool. I paid attention. Um, but so there's kind of all these things that have
Mm.
led towards this, and I've said it many times where I feel like there's just there's so much potential now for great things to happen, but there's such a overstated feel of mediocrity going across everything creative right now that is
Mm.
depressing. And that's why people just start rebooting everything or trying to, and in some ways it works out well. For instance, the whole resurgence of bands like ours and Shadows Fall and
Mhm.
Kitty and whomever, like it brings about an open window for bands like that who were actually trying to make better music and create something great to where in this pool of mediocrity, we have to reach back and grab onto these good ideas and try to bring them back to the forefront, just like any other
Yeah.
reboot. Now, sometimes that's going to work and sometimes that's going to fail, depending on where you reach from. Like, okay, why would you remake Roadhouse? Why did they do that? That is a terrible plan. That is a terrible plan. Don't remake
I agree.
Roadhouse.
I
Don't do
agree.
that. Don't remake Total Recall. Why did you do it? You know, it just, you failed. You shouldn't have done that. Red
The
Dawn, same
Crow.
thing.
The
The Crow
Crow.
is the Crow. I don't think they should have done, but I think it'll be a little bit more wide open, depend on how they carry the soundtrack and if they don't go overboard with the effects and the violence. Like it can't go too
That's
crazy.
all it looks like, man. That's all the trailer looks like
Well,
is violence.
that's what everything basically looks at like
Yeah,
right now.
that's
Like
fair.
because nobody can watch. Nobody likes character development. They don't like dialogue. There better be some blood or some fucking or something blowing up. Or if those three things ain't happening, then nobody wants to see it. I was talking to
Mm.
a younger one of the bands I work with was talking to one of the dudes about uh he's actually a works in the studio. And we're talking about Shogun and
Mm.
I'm from the era the Richard Chamberlain era of Shogun
Okay.
when it first came out. And I read the book when I was like 14.
Yeah.
So I was like into that shit. Like I've read that book multiple times and I watched because Shogun used to come on every year
Yep.
back then in the 80s. It used to come on as the little mini series on ABC
Mm.
or whatever the fuck it was. And watching the first few episodes, like, it's not like a lot of shit happens. It's all character, it's all dialogue and establishing what was going on during the time and the
Mm.
Christian Protestant battle and what was going on in Japan and everything. It's a lot of explanation, a lot of dialogue, and a lot of storytelling, but it's not like sex and violence and murder and but it's not that. It's actually just good old storytelling.
Mm.
But I'm talking to this dude, and he's not a child, but he's early 30s,
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like 30, 31, 32. And he goes, he's an Attila fan. So if that's any indication, just give me all that you give me the point now, and I don't give a shit about leading up to it. It's not about
Hmm.
the journey. Just give me the action. Just give
Hmm.
me the breakdown. Just give me the end result. And that's basically what everybody wants now. I want the end result. I don't give a fuck about the work. I don't want to hear about the work. I don't respect the
Hmm.
work. None of that shit. They don't give a shit about the history or what led up to that. Just give me, I want the nut. I want the money. I want the
Hmm.
fucking, I want the pussy, whatever it is, the
Yeah.
end result. That's what they want. And, that's all well and good. But what does that make? That makes a bunch of fucking Jiffy Pop music, films, TV shows, because that's all you're going to get. It's just better looking people with doing less. You know what I mean? Like, that's basically because what do they do in every reboot? They just find people that are better looking, put them in better shape, and then just regurge the same shit. But now the chemistry's fucked up. You know what I mean? And it's like that's the thing that you can't recreate as well. It's like I say this all the time. It's like Velvet Revolver, right? So you have all this
Oh
talent,
man.
right? And
Yeah.
they didn't do anything. I'm not saying they did anything bad, but the
Yeah.
one thing that you really expected in that band more than anything else in the universe was what? The ultimate epic, memorable, big time arena hooks.
Hmm.
Because I mean, you look at the dudes from those two bands, what did
Hmm.
they do? They delivered some of the best riffs and hooks of emotional quality that you have ever heard in your fucking life. And then Revolver Fall, they Revolver, they lead you right to that point, and then they just cut it off before they give it to you. It's the worst set of musical bull balls I've ever experienced in my life. I was like, this is not right. What you're doing, you motherfuckers need to put out. You know what I'm saying? You
What
don't you
about
don't, you don't need to be there. Don't put out.
what about a movie like Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, right? That was all character development. Granted, it had right some violence in it, but what did you think of that? Because I watched it, I got it. I didn't really enjoy it, but I like Shogun quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I
So,
mean, Shogun to me is still very much entertaining.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like, or it's like Godfather 2.
mm,
Like, there's not an excessive amount of violence in that film. I mean, there's violence, and
yeah,
it's a long motherfucker. You're talking 2 hours and 20 minutes,
yeah,
but most of it is just storytelling. They're just telling you a story, and
hmm,
but it's a well told fucking story. You know what I
okay,
mean? Like the amount of detail that goes in that story, and how they take you to these places, and to where some of it's like it's almost you can envision it in your mind's eye right now.
hmm,
You could have not seen that movie in years, but you could see it in your mind. I think that seeing like the Joker's like, I love Joaquin Phoenix, but it's there also becomes a section where subjectively things become a little too artistic, and this shit is entertainment. It's
okay,
like it's like The Walking Dead too. It's like so Walking Dead started a certain way, and you're like, man, this show is dope. It's not just a zombie show. This is just a really good show. Then
hmm,
they went full gore fest on you, and then every episode was the amazing, disgusting escape. You know, and then but
yeah,
somewhere I think it's like season 4 or 5, they started having those episodes where it's just Daryl locked in a closet for
yep,
40 minutes, and then there's like 6 minutes of like dialogue, and you're like, what the fuck? See, this is the point at which they have gone full
mm,
artistic. And like for me, it's not that I don't understand the point of it, but that for me is like, it's like a little too far
okay.
to be entertaining. You know what I
I
mean? Like,
see what you're saying.
and I,
Yeah,
I love I love Joaquin. I feel like he is one of the greatest actors of our time. Like he is super ridiculously talented for sure. And I felt like he did everything he was supposed to do for what that production was.
Sure.
But it's one of those things like where for me, I start to lose the entertainment value of it all, even though I respect what
Okay.
it is.
I see
I
what you're
just,
saying.
it's not like I'm gonna be like, hey, you know what? You guys want to come over and watch Joker tonight? You're not gonna call up some chick and be like, hey, I'm watching Joker. You want to swing through? No, that's not gonna happen. You know what I mean? Like, um, I just feel like there's certain things that it's like they're good, but it might be too far one direction to keep them from being great in an overall capacity. Um,
Okay.
like there's a couple of machines like um Imperium and like
Oh
some of
yeah.
those like I feel like I love Machine Head, but I can't just listen to those records at random. I gotta light some candles. I gotta get in the tub. I gotta I gotta get the mood right before y'all listen to that shit.
Yeah.
Like it's a whole event.
It is.
Whereas like Burn My Eyes, I could throw anything off that album on anytime
Oh man, so
because
good.
it's such a great album. You know what I mean? Or The More Things Change. I love that fucking record.
Yep.
But it's a little more listenable and less dramatic and like those albums later written like when Phil joined the band are great because they're so much more metally, I guess would be a kind of a whack adjective to use, but it's one I'm going to use right now. But they're so fucking epic that it's like watching like a Japanese horror movie where it's like 99.9% build up and that 0.1% had better be the shit. Because if it's not, and I felt like Joker was like that. It was 99.9% build up and that
Yeah.
0.1% was not enough to blow you over the edge and be like, well, all right, now I understand why you built this up for
Yeah.
1 hour and 49 minutes. And then on the 1 hour and 50th minute, you drop the fucking shit. I feel like if you can do that and you can just drop that bomb or whatever it is that closes the deal and seals up why you had so much artistic development, that's one
Yeah.
thing. But when you can't achieve that goal and you just kind of leave motherfuckers out there in limbo artistic land,
Yeah.
I mean, some people are gonna like it. Like I feel like that's shit that like hipsters like because
Oh,
they
yeah.
know that they know that other people don't understand to like it. So they want to like it so they seem smarter and more avant-garde than they are. It's like that's that kind of shit. Like I'm gonna say that
Yeah.
I love this because it is not commercial and I want to seem smarter and have more eclectic tastes and be mildly pretentious and so I can look down my nose at other people. Because I mean, there's plenty of people that are like that too. They love to look
Yeah.
down their nose at other people because they're
Absolutely.
into something and then tell you, well, you just don't get it. It's not
Yeah.
that I don't get it. I'm just not entertained, motherfucker. Fuck you.
Yeah.
That's usually my response to that kind of activity. But that's just me. But
I agree. It's hard. Well, like I have a few metal friends that are like, death metal purists, and like you need to like this band, or like, what do you mean you don't like this band? Like, the band Batushka, they came around a couple of months ago, and all my friends like talked them up. You're gonna love it. You gotta see it. And like that was one of the bands I walked out of because there was musically they may be great. I don't know. I didn't even have the chance. I couldn't. It was boring. It was a lot of like, right? There was a lot of stuff on the stage, but there was nothing like happening for me. And like they were like, how could you walk out of that? I'm like, it doesn't do for me what it does for you. But right, that alters now the perception. It's like, oh, Chris doesn't like this, or Chris went to see this other band. Like I went to go see the Callous Cowboys, and a lot of people are like, you chose that show over this other, popular death metal show. Why would you do that? And it's like, why are you trying to make me feel bad for this difference in what I want to explore, right? I'm new to the Callous Cowboys. I
well,
don't know them. I want to check them out. But
well, I will say this: when you're dealing with death metal fans, I feel like death metal fans and black metal fans are some of the most judgmental people in the entirety of music. Like like I would
Mm.
relate them to like strictly classical music fans or strictly jazz
Oh.
music fans, where it's like there's a pretentious nature about those genres and their fans, to where it's like they're not happy unless they can exclude other people and then tell them how shitty
Mm.
they are for not being
Mm.
included or because they don't like this shit. And now some people would say it's because of, you know, respecting the technical proficiency
Hmm.
of those genres of music. Now, on some level, I can understand that. On some level, I can't. Because to be fair, a lot of death metal bands, technically, from a certain aspect, it's technically proficient, but really, it's three skills that they just develop really, really well, which
Hmm.
is primarily geared around just playing a lot of notes and playing them very fast.
Hmm.
Now, to me, that doesn't necessarily make you technically proficient. There's bands like Children of Bodom; those motherfuckers are technically proficient.
Hmm.
You know, Alexi was extremely technically proficient, but you know what else he could do? He writes some rockin' ass riffs.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And there
Yeah.
to me, it's like, how you gonna hate on that? But it's like I feel like those genres, like your hardcore jazz fans that don't like anything
Mm.
else but, you know, Thelonious Monk and fucking whatever,
Hmm.
fusion kind of cats, death metal fans, black metal fans, why they hate each other's music, they had some similar qualities. They
Mm.
love being exclusionary. They
Mm.
love looking down on people like you're just too stupid and you don't get
Hmm.
what's going on here and how crazy this shit is. I get how crazy it is. I just don't give a fuck because they're
Yeah.
not presenting it in a way that makes me want to give a fuck.
Right.
You're giving
Right.
them, and half the time, these people, they don't give a fuck either. They give a fuck because they want to be a part of the people that get to look down on other people
Mm.
and not be excluded and do the excluding. So, I
Hmm.
mean, you're going to run into that shit
Mm.
constantly. And I feel like, yeah, people say, the metal world is accepting, and I mean, to a certain extent, but and I actually had a conversation with John Campbell about this one night because he calls me, we just text each other, call each other random about just random shit. And he was at a party and he heard some shit that he didn't like that was kind of racist, and he got very upset. So he decided he was going to call me and tell me about it.
Mm.
And we got to talking about, um, just talking about metal, talk about our bands and stuff like that. And he was talking about when Art joined the band,
Mm.
joined Lamb of God. And he's like, what if you had joined the band? I was like, that would never happen. And it's not because I fear the playing. I mean, I've heard all the songs like 1,000 times. And to be fair, most of the drum parts are primarily the same. There's like the same four things going on. They have a style that
Right.
it's adhered as it is adhered to. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That is their style, this bluesy, groovy sort of style. And I've seen it a lot. And it's like I'm not afraid to play anything. Like I believe anything can be learned and played if you put your mind to it. But I said to him, I would never kill your career like that. Like you can't have a black dude at Lamb of God. Like that is career disaster. You know what I mean? Like they would crucify you motherfuckers. Like, picture Sammy Davis in the Rat Pack type of shit. There'd be burning crosses. There would be some bad shit going down. And I said, you know what, too? I said, picture this in your mind. Because this question has come up many times. Like, you know, um, do you think God forbid wasn't bigger because it was a predominantly black band? Now, obvious the PC answer is to say no, you know, um, because you don't want to kind of lean on that crutch or make it out like, oh, we're going to make this a race thing now, which is
Mm.
what a lot of people say when they don't really have answers for why it is a race thing and they don't want to talk about it. So then they
Hmm.
try to make you feel bad for bringing it up. Like that's the only reason you're bringing it up. Now,
Mm.
me, I'm not really a lean on the man is trying to keep me down kind of thing.
Hmm.
But my example of that is picture in your mind if Lamb of God was entirely black. Same riffs, same
Hmm.
songs, same everything, but picture them black. Now, do you think they would be as large as they are right now?
No,
There is
no,
no fucking way. No
no.
fucking way. And I remember having a conversation with Mark, and this was years ago,
Mm.
and we were once again riding into that fucking Norva again. That's actually pretty odd. And I was stowed away on their bus, and I was talking to him in the morning. And I was like, and this was a little ways after Dime had passed, and I remember saying to him, "You guys are going to be like the next Pantera." I was like, don't get me wrong. It's like, it's bluesy, groovy metal played by a bunch of redneck white boys in camo shorts. That's what the entire metal world is waiting for right now. All you got to do is just take the step up. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened.
Yep.
And it wasn't really hard to tell. The writing was on the wall. And I mean, to be fair, and I'm not, I love those dudes like family. That's family. Like
Yeah.
we've spent a lot of time together in very close knit situations, to say the least. Um, but they had the talent, of course, and the style, but they
Hmm.
had the look that white people wanted to see and are accustomed to. If that would have been a
Yeah.
band full of black dudes, there is no way in the world that Lamb of God would be the size that they are now. There's no fucking way. And
I
anybody
fully
who tells
agree.
you different is just lying to save face because that's
I
just not reality.
I would love to see, they've done this a million different ways, right? You put on a song by a band, and then like at first you show people, right? You get two groups of people. One group sees the band as like the black band, and one group sees the band as the white band, and see the
Mm.
reactions, because I think it would prove you exactly right. Um, and you know, different but similar things with Kitty, right? It was a bunch of young girls playing this like, not mainstream metal. I think there was a certain appeal to that by itself that wasn't entirely, genuine or innocent,
Well,
that
the
people
thing
wanted to
about
exploit.
the difference about that, and I say this all the time, is I feel like females in metal are celebrated. It's like a big,
Mm,
huge thing, where it was like a super positive thing. Kitty
mm,
coming out there, like everybody's so excited that these girls were playing this heavy music.
mm,
Whereas when it's a racial thing, people start to get fearful. Like they're
yeah,
they're angry that these black dudes are playing this music that they like so much. Like it
yeah,
pisses them off. Whereas, hot girls playing heavy music excites it. Obviously,
yeah.
that excites everybody. But
Yeah.
I felt it's just one of those things. It's like it's the same situation, but it's very different in the
Hmm.
outcome and in
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
overall stigma and feel of the people is different because everybody got right behind that. They were
Hmm.
excited about it. For us, I never really felt like there's nobody that came like unless they were black. They never came up and expressed that kind of excitement about black dudes. But most of the time, like I said, this music is heavy music is very exclusionary.
Hmm.
And I mean, you've missed a fraction of it from just death metal fans telling you, oh, you shouldn't, why would you not like this? Now,
Yeah,
picture that. Now, amp it times 1,000 because
yeah,
now, not only are you there where you're quote unquote not supposed to be, but you're playing music you're not supposed to be playing.
yeah,
Also, from a certain perspective, you're doing it well. So now you're threatening the stranglehold that the people they like to play their music has on it.
yeah.
So now you're a threat and you're a source of anger and malcontent.
Hmm.
So how do you overcome that? And how do you prove it? Because you're never going to prove it. Not really.
Hmm.
There's no way you're going to get people to admit it, especially not nowadays. They'll hide. And most, like I said, most of those kind of people, they're cowards.
Yeah.
They're not going to come out and say what's really on their mind, you know, which I almost rather prefer. I'd rather prefer a motherfucker that's outwardly racist. At least you know where the fuck he stands.
That's true.
And there's a lot of motherfuckers in between that, oh, I'm not racist, but let uh let them get into a car accident with an Indian person or a black dude or something. Now
Yeah.
all the hate speech is gonna immediately come out. Or, some Puerto Rican guy fucking some Irish guy's daughter. So let's see what happens after that, after he just said, oh, I work with Puerto Rican guys at the warehouse, but now one of them fucking your daughter, you got a whole different vocabulary of racial epithets that's coming out of your face. And I've seen it a
Absolutely.
thousand times, where people say one thing, but let some adversity come their way, and immediately all that shit comes flying out their face.
Yeah.
But I mean, so that's one of those things where it's like you can't prove it, but I have a way of expressing myself that I feel like that's proof enough. you know. Now,
Sure.
whether that was an actual factor in how big the band got or wasn't going to get or whatever, I don't know. Technically, I
Yeah.
don't know. But deep in my heart, in my soul, I know that it's, at least at some level, it was a portion of the factors that
I
went
would
into that. And I'm not
agree.
saying we didn't make mistakes or, we made plenty of poor decisions and had tons of rough roads. And still, we
Yeah.
made it farther than 98% of bands ever get. So in that respect, like
Yeah.
music is worse than pro sports. It's even harder to be successful in music than it is in pro sports, and that's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah. Yeah.
The success
Well,
rate is very minimal.
if God forbid came out today, do you think you would do better or worse or about the same as when you did come out?
Um, it's harder to try. A part of me feels like it would be better, not because I think that the world is that much more accepting.
Hmm.
I just feel like the the general mood of pushing towards
Hmm.
a band like we were would be
Hmm.
it would be more popular to do. It would be more
Okay.
popular to go to follow a band like us, at least for a time. Like I
Yeah.
feel like not that we would be a novelty band, but there would be more of a social push in
Hmm.
this scene to follow our band than it was when we basically had to slug it out and earn it every step of the way. I feel
Mm.
like there would be a little bit more. Take a couple steps and then we'll have momentum to gain five, as opposed to when we came out, it was literally, we're fighting for every inch.
Yeah.
And that's basically the way it stayed for for the entire time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do realize that if we hadn't have done that, then there's a lot of other people that it would be harder for, um, which you're not always going to get acknowledged for. But
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about that. I've met a lot of those people, and I said, like, like tons of people of color that have come up to me, like whether they're black or Hispanic or whatever, and said, we saw you guys do it, so it made it okay for me to like
Mm.
this music. It made it okay for me to admit to other people and find other people
Hmm.
that were like me and have it be okay without worry about being ridiculed or feeling like shit or feeling like I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that regard, as I feel like it's a big part of how it would have been better now,
Yeah.
but obviously without us doing that, then there would be no better now to have. So there's the
Yeah.
catch-22 of that situation. But, my thoughts are just like just the way that society is now, there'd be more of a popular push to go follow a band like us now. There
Yeah.
I feel like there'd be a little less, um, clawing for every step than there was
Hmm.
then. So,
Yeah, I can't I mean, I don't right, I don't do anything in the public eye. I'm not a musician, I don't do anything performance-wise, so I can't imagine what it's like just in general to try, and I love talking to the local bands about what it's like for them, but, you know, me going to a lot of shows is not me playing on stage, right? Me talking to you about it, obviously I don't live that experience. So it's awesome to hear your perspective, but it's like how to process that is, is still something to figure out.
well, I mean, if you figure it out, let me know because I don't know that I've got it figured out, but, you know, I basically just come to a point where you just you gotta take certain things in stride, and then you have to just gain a sort of better overall view, like, obviously, there were certain things about our career that was disappointing, and we hit a certain point where it was like, this is it. This is as far as we're gonna go. And
Mm,
there was a hump that we needed to get over that we just couldn't seem to get over
mm,
for whatever reason. And I clearly don't think it was a talent issue
mhm,
because I mean the albums that we wrote, there's no album that I'm not proud of or I can't say
mm,
is light years better than several other albums that I've heard from more
mm.
successful bands, if we're
Yeah,
looking at it from that perspective.
sure.
So, I mean, there's a lot of factors that could go into why, things weren't better or whatever. But, um, for me, it's like you just have to make peace with certain things at a certain point.
Mm,
Like you have to realize what you have done and not dwell on what you didn't do because you can't change it anyway. So you just
mm,
drive yourself crazy. But you also really like it's hard to appreciate what you have done in those moments when shit is going bad after so many
mhm.
years. I mean, there's a lot of years of work, a lot of years of writing, a lot of years of touring
Yeah.
and, being broke and, sleeping in shitty places and all being detached from relationships and
Mm,
family and life goes on without you, all that kind of shit, like all the shit that people don't talk about that burdens you down from being in a band and
yeah.
breaks you, emotionally, mentally, physically. Um, and then trying to quantify what all that was worth.
Yeah.
And that's not the easiest thing to do,
No, I can't
because
imagine.
initially, you have those feelings like, well, none of it was worth it, like, is this how all was going to turn out? Like, I went through all this just to
Mm,
not get all the way there, sort of feeling, or to get knocked down right before what should have been the best part. Like, how come we didn't get to jump to such and such level? And
yeah.
there's, whatever factors or reasons, and no one's going to be able to, it's not something you can just quantify that easily.
Mm,
But what you do have to do is, while you're taking stock of all that, is say basically what I just told you. Like the odds for a band to be successful for a year
mhm,
are in a ridiculous low percentage.
mhm,
Most bands will come out even if they get signed to a like even like like an independent like a Century Media or a Metal Blade. They'll make it a
mhm,
year. They'll make it 2 years, maybe like one album, and then they're gone.
mm,
Maybe two albums, definitely gone. 3 albums is like crazy. You know,
mm,
to have success over a 3 album period is extremely difficult. To manage a almost 2-decade career of being able to tour and travel around the world is extremely difficult.
mhm,
And the percentage of bands at that level of success is beyond minute. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Um, so you have to say to yourself, like, here we were, just these guys that were jamming in a fucking garage in the middle of fucking July in the fucking ridiculous heat, and our
Yep.
singer came by and got pissed off because he got written a ticket. And flash forward, you're playing Ozfest in front of 20,000 people. You're doing download in front of 70, 80,000 people.
Yeah.
Everybody can't say that. You know what I mean? Everybody can't say that they've sold records all around the world or seen over 80
Yeah.
countries. Everybody can't say that. So I mean, in that regard, I was like, man, we actually accomplished a lot. And then the unspoken things, like I said, that we accomplished and people that we affected is even on a certain level more of a success than all the shit that everybody knows.
Yeah.
So that for
Yeah.
me became how I sort of quantified everything and made peace with it. That I also just started thinking like, okay, well, I love playing music, but I need to find something else to do with myself that also, makes use of my time and my same kind of work ethic. So
Yeah.
I taught myself a
That's
lot of different things.
yeah. Hmm.
I, I learned a lot about cooking, about running a kitchen. I taught myself how to fix small engines.
Nice.
I practice like three languages now. Um, I went and found studio work from producing and then just filling in, doing different stuff. Um, so for me, it was just like I need to know that I can do other things and I can move on in life without
Yeah.
relying on this to be my everything. And I
Yeah.
love music more than anything else in the world. But for me, I don't know, like there's people that love being famous and they love music, but they love being famous more than they love music. And I
Yeah.
understand that fame is a tool that you can utilize to achieve more success. But for me, I just never envisioned myself being famous and I never thought of myself as being that kind of person.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
I see.
there's certain things too that I'm just not willing to do that I know you need to be willing to do if you want to attain a certain level of fame.
Yeah.
There's certain sacrifices that you need to make in your life and how you relate to other people that I'm just not prepared to do. I'm just not. And I realize that about myself, so I can't get mad if I'm not out there chasing whatever level of success that people would say, okay, now you're successful if you're here, here, here.
Mm. I see.
Um, it was never my intention to be out in front of a bunch of people or be in the spotlight or I mean, really when you break it down, I mean, even playing live shows for me, it's like it's okay. I know everybody else is definitely more about that rush for them. And like me, I like writing the shit. Once I'm done
Mm.
writing new material, I'm ready to just move on. I don't need to go in the
Mm.
studio. I don't want to fucking play it anymore. I just want to move on to the next, writing some new cool shit. Like so playing shows to me just felt like work, you
Mm.
know.
All right.
And especially for me, it's just like I sit in the back, I sweat my dick off, I get no recognition, all you get is the dirty looks from your band if you're not playing how they want you to play. So it's like, where is
Yeah.
the advantage for me in all of this? I have the most shit to carry, the most expensive shit to break.
Yeah.
All I do is fucking sweat my balls off all the fucking time while these motherfuckers stand around and get all the accolades. So where's
Yeah.
the upside for me in this equation? Valid point, I would think. But
I've heard it from a number of drummers. I've heard that same thing,
yeah,
right?
because it's a shitty, stupid job. It's a job with the most pressure and the least amount of respect
Mm.
on a consistent basis. Because all you do is take shit the majority of the time.
Yeah.
You know, that's basically you're a whipping post for everybody else in the band because you got to hear every incident from four other people or three other people in the band. You're the only person that is going to hear it from everybody. No one else in the band
That's
is
a
going to
fair
hear it.
point.
And it sucks. And it's why, the shelf life on being a drummer, oftentimes, like you see a lot of drummers get traded out because it's a shitty
Yeah.
job in many aspects.
Mm,
I mean, there are situations where people respect their drummers and they treat them nicely or whatever. But I mean, in my experience over the years, I mean, it's generally in being in a band, it's the shittiest job to have.
mm,
And it takes a certain mentality to even take it on, let
yeah.
alone continue it for years on end. You
Mm,
know, it takes a certain level of work ethic and backbone and spirit because you can't just, it's easy to be broken being a drummer,
yeah.
I think, more than any other part of the band. In the live situation, it's the easiest person to call out when anybody has a problem. It's
Yeah.
you're the first person, like, and you can't hide. If you got two guitar players, one guitar player can hide. If there's like a couple seconds of feedback or something, they drop a pick or something, you just go on. Bass player does it, you just go on. Singer
Yeah.
throws the mic by the crowd and lets the crowd sing.
Yeah.
Those couple moments go by, no one gives a shit. The drummer fucks up, everybody knows. And everybody's giving you that shitty look like they just smelt some shit,
Yep.
and you gotta take it from everybody, and I mean, it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of responsibility for
Yeah.
not really much gain. You
Yep.
know what I mean? You have to truly just really love doing it a lot, you know, in order to endure all the other shit that goes along with it.
Bet.
you
I
know.
bet, man.
So there's that.
Well, Corey, I know it's pretty late by you, and I know it's the end of your night, so I really appreciate your time and everything, but I want to be respectful of it too. Um,
Oh fuck, it's 10:30. We've been on here for a minute.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
need to take my ass to sleep. I'm getting old now, so I'll be up for a little
but
bit, but I got to do all my Twitter and whatever
oh
posts
yeah, do
then.
you think in the future though we need to talk about some movies?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I've been trying to get on it. Like I think now that I finished this this producing this record, I'm gonna take a little time. I'm gonna start trying to get these spaces together on the weekends to just
Nice.
talk shit on movies and TV shows and get a bunch of people, wrangle some people on Twitter involved and
There we
get that
go.
shit going. Because I
All
think it'll
right.
be fun. I think it'll be fun. Talk shit.
Oh yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks so much, Corey. Appreciate it. And I can't wait to hear um what you guys have coming for us.
Well, you'll be hearing it soon enough. Got a lot of stuff
Look
coming down
forward
the
to it.
pike.
Awesome. All right, Corey. Well, hey, have a good night, man.
You too, man. Thanks again.
Take care.